Hello and welcome back to the No Ratings podcast. This is a slightly special edition of the Insight. You guys have been tweeting us and enjoying the Insight so much that we've decided we're going to pick a few topics that we've sort of thought are interesting this season. And this topic is Nottingham Forest because we feel there's a little secret recipe, something going on with this team that we're going to reveal very soon. And as usual, I've got Pythag with me. Let's talk about Nottingham Forest this season on the whole, first of all. Doing incredibly well in the league. What do you think's been going on?
I just think they're a team that has grasped what it means to succeed in the Premier League. If you were to look at the archetypal Premier League team in terms of how you would look to set it out, I think Nottingham Forest encapsulate a lot of what the Premier League is about. So, for example, like a target man up front who's strong, he's physical, he can run channels, he's good in the box. Then you've got the pace in wide areas, very direct threats in terms of Ilanga, Hudson Odoi.
Mm.
And then they're also quite progressive in the fullback region, which is it's almost a throwback really in terms of Aina, Moreno. So they've got fullbacks who like to go forward, and then you've got someone like Murillo who's a real sort of character at the back. So in terms of Murillo and Wood, you've got spinal characters, and then you've got Gibbs White, who's someone who I think he's always been the standout for Forest in previous seasons, but it's almost as if now he doesn't need to shoulder the burden of carrying this team. The rest of the team has sort of come on board with him. So now he's part of a really good, solid football team now.
I think you make a few really good points. I think also the manager is something we're definitely going to talk about. Nuno, if you remember it, was it his first season or his second season at Wolves where they were new to the Premier League? I'm pretty sure it was his first season. Ruben Neves had just come up in the Championship and they were associated with this like exciting, dynamic footballing team. Sometimes three at the back, sometimes five at the back. I can remember that team so well. Matt Doherty, Adama Traore, Raul Jimenez, like lots of these flair players. And then somewhere along the way, that tailed off, they became negative. And I think they've landed, in terms of Forest, this is somewhere in the middle of that. Conceded 19 goals this season. They've only scored 29, and we were speaking about this just before we started recording. I think they're much more exciting than the 29 goals show, but because they've got that solid back line, which we're going to talk about also, I think they found themselves in a really nice position in the Premier League. But what I wanted to ask you is, let's talk about the front four, the back four, like we just spoke before we started recording. Where's the magic in this? What do you think is the secret between these two bits connecting?
I just think it's about balance. Like if you're a coach and you're looking for like if you're creating a checklist of what I want from my attack, you'd look for I want pace there, I want dribbling ability one on one when you're squared up against someone. I'd want crosses coming into quite a threat inside the box, aerial ability inside the box, and then I'd want a creator who can sort of thread the little through balls, shoot from
Mm,
range. And then when you start looking at this checklist, it's kind of crazy. Like Forest seem to tick a lot of that checklist. And we're not saying like this is a team that's a world class football team. I mean, if they end up in top four, fair play to them. But I don't think it's like a long term team here where I think it's going to change the Premier League, but it's just a very functional football team. It's a sort of team that you'd dream of like in grassroots football when you're trying to build a team. You're like, yeah, I want a bit of this, I want a bit of that. And they just
mm.
seem to tick so many boxes in terms of their attack. They've got a bit of everything in terms of the attack, and then in terms of the defense, very similar. Again, like I said, uh, they've got fullbacks who can hold the width. Someone like Aina, he can play left back, he can play right back. They've got a two-footed fullback. Murillo, someone who can play out from the back, but he's also a bit of a character, a bit of a leader, throws himself into tackles as well. So you're looking at a very complete outfit. I think for me, the only weakness is the midfield. Like, I don't see that midfield ever going on and becoming something at the world level.
Mm.
But it's a functional team. It reminds me a bit like having Danny Drinkwater for Leicester, where you've got these functional cogs who are just doing an absolute job. But you know for a fact, if these players were taken out of that and thrown into a top side, they'd struggle to swim. And that's the way I see Forest's midfield.
I've got a question for you that just sprung to my mind there. We talk a lot about how football's become maybe a little bit stale, a little bit boring. Every team's playing the same thing. Do you think by Forest maybe becoming the antidote to that now, that they're, as you mentioned, big number nine up top, two big centre backs that win every duel, fullbacks that hold with wingers that are quick and direct and essentially run to the byline and cut back. I think of the Wood goal against Wolves in the most recent game. Hudson-Odoi takes on his fullback right to the byline, little cut back, and it's a tap in for the striker. They're now the opposite of what Guardiola wants, what Arteta wants.
It's a very similar team, and this sounds crazy as a comparison, but it's almost like a Poundland version of like a Bayern Munich of Jupp Heynckes 2013, right?
Poundland.
Where they had like Mandzukic up top. Chris Wood is
Mm.
like a Poundland Mandzukic type of player up top, where big, strong, mobile, absolute handful. Like you just know every centre back's gonna hate playing against this guy. Then you've got width out wide, and then you got full backs who are like that Bayern Munich team used to have Philip Lahm and Alaba.
Mm.
So like they used to have two fullbacks who were like proper ballers. And this again, it's like a Poundland version, but you got Aina and you got Moreno, ballers at fullback, really. And then the only difference I say is that Bayern Munich midfield was very, very strong. But this is the sort of vibe I'm getting from a tactic. It's very 4-2-3-1. Like it's not reinventing the wheel in any way, shape, or form, but it's just very 2000s,
Mm.
10s vibe.
I think you know me, I love psychology. I think the psychological side of this is also really important because Forest are now this side that um, I think the problem. Let's go rewind a little bit. The problem, say, Chelsea have is Chelsea can't play Man City at home and not attack. It's unacceptable. Chelsea have to play Man City at all times and attack. Maybe not this season's Man City, but generally speaking, Forest at home can park the bus, and they've got the players to park the bus. I look at the game at Anfield where they sat off, and then hit Liverpool on the counter with Hudson-Odoi and in more recent games at Alanga because they've got these electric wingers, almost like throwback Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. You know, in those games where he surrendered possession. But then on the flip side, when they take on a Villa, where it's a little more pound for pound, they can go pound for pound because they've got these players. So from a psychological perspective, the lack of, well, I won't say pressure, but the lack of expectation allows them to be expansive while also being pragmatic, probably leading to them having the joint second best defence in the league while also only scoring 29 goals. And I think that character shift suits Nuno. The kind of part-time underdog who occasionally doesn't need to be a part-time underdog.
Yeah. It suits his style of management because when he was at Spurs and then suddenly the expectation was to be very
Mm.
front foot, he didn't know what he was doing. This is very in his comfort zone. But credit to him because everyone has their own niche. This is his kind of niche. I mean, I mentioned Bayern Munich, but a more relevant example would probably be Leicester under Ranieri, where that team with Mahrez, Vardy, Kante, etc. You know, it was a team that just knew almost instinct-wise which game it was going to really go for the jugular, which moments of the game it was just going to sit back and then counter-attack. And like I said, because of this attack being quite well-rounded, it is in theory more suited to being a transitional team. But if they are in a game where they're dominating a bit of territory, then you've got someone like Wood who you can fire crosses into, and even if you're up against a low block, he's going to probably out jump the centre backs he's up against and then get that winning goal, and there'll be a threat from set pieces as well. So again, uh, a well-rounded team, very well-rounded.
Would you say their secret recipe or secret sauce is that they're a throwback team and everyone is shocked by it? Or would you say it's that they're a complete team, but just as you say, a pound version of the elite complete teams?
I think their secret recipe is how complete they are from a tactical point of view, which is in of itself a throwback because I think we see a lot of teams get themselves pigeonholed into playing a very predictable patterned style of play. And a lot of teams now are not really using overlapping fullbacks. They're kind of relying on these inverted wingers, but they're not giving them any support. So the attacks just seem to funnel away into nothing. And then you've got a lot of centre forwards in the Premier League, which are not really centre forwards. If you take Haaland out of it, and probably Isak, I'd say
Mm.
a lot of teams are struggling with real top level nines who are consistent in front of goal, whereas Forest have got themselves a centre forward who's reliable and efficient in front of goal. So you take all of that together, they're thriving in what is a transitional season tactically for a lot of big teams.
All right. Well, I think I was going to say one more thing about Nottingham Forest that I think we've kind of touched on and sort of like gone around the point, but the recruitment. if you think about that back line, Olaena obviously a signing, I want to say, from Fulham. I've had a number of goalkeepers, actually. I think they've finally managed to land on one that they trust. Then Alex Moreno on loan from Aston Villa. The two centre-backs, Milinkovic and Murillo, both great signings. The midfield, I agree. Bar Morgan, Gibbs White, Ryan Yates, I don't really think he's... I don't want to disrespect him as a fresh footballer, so but he's not. He might be the Jordan Henderson, if you like, of this team. But then you have Alanga and Hudson-Odoi and Wood and Taiwai when he off the bench, and they've built this, like you said, almost like a complete cheat code of a team that if things go well on the day, they can almost beat any team in the league, which they've proven on repeat this season.
I think obviously long term it'll be interesting to see next year when they haven't got this surprise factor, how effective they'll be from a tactical point of view. And I reckon some of these players could potentially get picked up. Like I'm looking at someone like Aina. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the big European teams come sniffing for someone like that. Whereas the rest of the team, I can see, well, Murillo as well, I can see also being on people's radar. But I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of the team kind of stays intact. However, I do think the surprise factor will be missing going into next season.
And also, lucky for them, they're not playing European football, which I think people don't talk about often. But in a title race like this, where you've got Liverpool and Arsenal playing these extra games, and Man City are not in the title race, and I don't think Forest are in the title race, by the way. But they have that extra rest, and that's very, very useful. Just before we wrap up, do you think they're going to finish in the top four?
I don't think it's impossible. Just because we've seen it happen with Leicester in a season which was super transitional, where all the big teams were just so predictably bad. I think what I would say is it does feel like the bigger teams aren't as bad as that particular season. But I wouldn't say it's impossible, no, because there's a sense of any team could implode at any moment.
I think they get Europe. I don't think they get Champions League. But
yeah, I mean, if I had to put my money on it, I'd probably say, it sounds ludicrous that they'll finish top four, but like I said, football's a very strange game.
Yeah. If there was a season for it, it's probably this season.
Yes.
Insight fans, or just No Ratings fans, if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or listen to the podcast, then make sure you subscribe. Follow Pythag as usual. And if you want to see more pieces like this, then make sure you drop it in the comments on both YouTube and Spotify. I will warn you, I'm not going to say this at the start of the podcast, you might have clicked away, but it's about 1:45, and this is a bit of a pre-record. He's just jumped out of bed, and I've got a flight tomorrow. Hence the toned down voices, the different setup boxes in the back. If you can bear with us, one day the production will be absolutely squeaky clean, and that's the day we're all chasing. But for now, we'll see you on the next one.